So what we're looking at here is that stakeholders in the agriculture sector are concerned about the draft regulations, which are set to introduce a black shareholding requirement of up to 75% for water licenses. Now, they're saying that they display a lack of understanding of the Constitution, the law, water rights, and the role of the dynamics of water in agriculture and food security in South Africa. Joining me now for more on this is Annelies Crosby from the Agriculture Business Chamber of South Africa. Very good evening to you, Annelies, and thank you for joining us this evening. Let's start with those draft regulations that were published by the department. One of the requirements now being a black shareholding of between 25 to 75%. Tell us what your thoughts are as a chamber and whether it is the right direction under which the department should be going when it comes to the getting of water licenses.
Thank you very much. AGBIS represents the agricultural value chain, and what these regulations are basically now requiring is that the element of redress in the National Water Act, which is one factor that in terms of that legislation is supposed to be considered when the department allocates water use rights, is basically going to be the only focus really when they consider whether or not to grant the rights. Now the irrigation sector is a critical sector in agriculture. Most of our fruit, wine, vegetables require irrigation, and those farmers, some of them are still using the old licenses, but if there's a conversion, and it looks like there's going to be compulsory licensing generally now, they will have to comply with this requirement going forward. And many of them have invested very, very heavily in the infrastructure. You know, setting up a vineyard or an orchard is very expensive. So we really don't have a problem at all with the fact that these rights need to be extended to the black farmers and black smallholders as well. But the way in which this is being done, we do not think is in line with the National Water Act in the first place, because of the focus only on that one requirement and not on all the others that it needs to be balanced with, and also because of potential unintended consequences that this may have.
Yeah, ideally, because this is just a draft regulation at this stage, and of course it's going to go through various processes. Ideally, when you say the best for all parties involved when it comes to these requirements, what would that look like after an engagement between yourselves as well as a department? What would an ideal situation look like that would benefit all those who operate in the sector?
Yeah, that's a very difficult question because it is a very complex matter that the department has struggled for many years. But we do now have a agricultural and agro-processing master plan that was signed by the stakeholders in the sector this year in May, and that master plan has a number of pillars where the sector has agreed to cooperate, and one of them deals with the expansion of equitable access to water for smallholders and black farmers. So really, I think that is the mechanism that needs to be used to engage the sector as a whole to come up with a solution which will not have the kind of unintended consequences that this one is likely to have.
Yeah, and I mean, one of those unintended consequences will be the produce that farmers and others in the agricultural value chain are able to create, and the export market also potentially being impacted by that. Talk us through some of the immediate or direct economic implications of the regulations coming into effect.
Yeah, so I'm not an economist, and I certainly wouldn't like to speculate. You know, we like to, when we put a view across, to be able to substantiate that. But our agricultural sector has been a keen driver of economic growth over the past few years, during COVID and also thereafter. And the export part of it, of course, is contributing greatly to our GDP. And many of these products, like the fruit and the wine and the veg that I mentioned, are export products. The farmers are already struggling, many of them, with the energy crisis and having to pay a lot of extra money towards solar and diesel generators and all of that to be able to cope with that. The sector as a whole is actually struggling with high input costs and all sorts of other factors. So, this on top of all of that is likely to have a negative impact. But on the extent of that impact, I wouldn't like to speculate at this stage.
No, absolutely. No, thank you very much for those insights. That is Annelies Crosby from the Agriculture Business Chamber of South Africa, or AGBIZ, as it's more commonly known.